Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Kanti and I'm working as the product manager here at Exact. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar on Prism for Nutrition Competency Forms. Today's presenter is Shubda Fuge, who is our senior product owner here at Exact. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please add your questions in the questions box. We will be pausing periodically to ensure your questions are answered. As usual, feel free to download today's presentation to follow along or keep it as reference. You can find it in the handout section. This webinar will be recorded and shared with you through email 1 hour after the webinar ends and will also be available on our YouTube channel. We are going to give everyone a few minutes just to let everyone get logged on and get their audio sorted. So we'll give it about 1 to 2 minutes and we'll be back with you just in few moments. And without further ado, we are going to go ahead and get started. Shubda.
Hello
Shubda,
everyone.
yeah,
Morning.
take it away, Shubda.
Okay, thank you, Kanti. Okay, everyone. So today's topic is Prism for Nutrition Competency Forms. Let's look at the agenda. So we will have a general overview of exact Prism's offering in terms of the forms and evaluations setup. We will then look at how competency tracking can be done through exact forms. We will also look at a sample workflow to just see how a program might track their competencies. And lastly, we will look at the report that could be generated for tracking competencies. Okay, so let's get started. So Exact Prism currently provides a platform for schools to build and administer forms or evaluations. Uh, this is a customizable platform, meaning schools can decide the questions, the forms that they want to set up, the questions they want to be part of these forms, and also the workflow that they would like to incorporate within the forms. So as such, if you want to look at some of the example use cases that could be implemented in Exact's offering, you could set up, for example, a student evaluation of clinical placement, student performance evaluation, faculty evaluations of students, daily evaluations, evaluation forms with scoring, and learning contracts, for example, could also be administered through Prism. These are just examples of a few use cases. If you have any specific use case, or you want to discuss, whether the forms that you are currently using within your program can be set up, you can get in touch with your account managers, and they will take the discussion forward. So let's move on. So to start with, let's look at how competency tracking works with Exact Prism. So today, there are a few steps that need to be followed before you can track competencies on Exact. So first of all, you would, as I said earlier, you would get in touch with your account managers and set up required forms and evaluations within the system. Once that is done, you would also need to provide us with mapping of your questions with competencies. So which questions are evaluating students on what competencies? That information you would need to provide to us. Uh, Today, the team needs to do some of these things from the backend, but we are working on building a new feature so that you are able to do it on your own from the front end. You are able to specify which competencies your program is going to evaluate on the front end itself, and also to specify how you are evaluating those competencies. So all of that, big feature is coming up. You would see it incrementally released on production throughout Q1 2024 and Q2 2024. But as of today, you would need to provide this mapping to us, and our team will set it up for you from the backend. Once that is done, the forms, would get uh, filled as per the setup workflow. Once that is done, you can track the students' progress against competencies using our competency reports. Any questions so far?
No questions, Shubda.
Let's move on. So today what we will do is we'll take an example of a form called encounter card. We'll just go through the whole workflow, how the screens, what the screens look like on Prism, and how different actors within the workflow can access the forms. Once we go through that, then we'll look at the report and how exactly the competencies are getting tracked. Okay. So encounter card is something that a school might set up so that students can log the encounters that they have had in a particular day, uh, and the expectation is that the preceptors would then evaluate the students against certain competencies and also review the details student has filled on their encounter cards. So this is a form that you would expect students to fill out on a daily basis, and eventually the preceptors would need to evaluate it. So the steps in the workflow are, first the student fills the encounter details, then they send it to the preceptor. Once preceptor receives it, they review the encounter details and also evaluate the student's performance. Once they submit this form, then school reviews the evaluation, and it ends the workflow there. And this happens for every encounter that the student enters. Okay. So we'll look at how these forms are activated on Prism, and then we'll go on from there. Let me try to open up the system. Okay, before I go anywhere. Okay, so to access your forms setup from your school login, uh, currently I'm logged in as a school administrator. So this is your dashboard. From the dashboard, you see learning activities tab over here. To manage everything related to forms, evaluations, timesheets, you would go inside this tab. This is the landing page for your learning activities. As you can see on the left hand side, currently we are in the course offerings view. It shows you listing of all of your courses, all of the course offerings that have been set up in the system. And it tells you for each of that course offering, what is the learning activity that has been activated. So the ones in blue are the ones that are activated, and the ones in gray are not yet activated for the course offering. Uh, you also get options to do some setup for every course offering here. But before we go there, let's explore some of the other elements of the screen. Report section, as the name suggests, you can access reports that are applicable to all of the course offerings. You can access those from here. There is also something called as learning activity groups. So learning activity groups are nothing but a grouping of courses which are, which you might find easier to manage together. So a lot of our schools, for example, want to manage all course offerings belonging to a cohort together. So a lot of times schools would end up creating learning activity groups for each of their cohorts. Uh, and I forgot to mention, but yeah, these groups you can create. You can create your own groups. You can group any courses that you would like as per your preference together and name it the way you want. To add the group, what you would do is you would click on add group here. You can name it whatever you want. Let's say class of 2024. Here, this gives you, so right now we don't have data set up for 2024, but let's just assume one of these was class of 2024. What this screen allows you to do is just filter out the courses that you want to be part of a group. You can select multiple courses from here. If you wanted to do, for example, grouping based on academic years, you could do that as well. So for example, let's say I wanted to group all the courses being offered this year. I could do that. Sadly, there is just one course. Let's just look at another year. Okay, so 24, 25, there are three courses. If I wanted to manage them together, I would do a multi-select here, click on next, and then you would save it, and this would create a learning activity group for you. I'm not going to save it. It affects our demo setup, but you can see a group created here. And once you click on one of those groups, the view that you get on the right hand side is of the courses that you selected to be part of that group. You also see rotations that belong to that group. So if you have seen placement setup within Prism, you set up rotations for every course, and then all of the rotations that belong to the courses that you had selected would show up over here, and you could access your learning activities from within a rotations view as well. The reports from here would allow you to do selections. It would basically put filters as per the group that you have selected, so you don't have to it saves you a few clicks of putting up filters for the courses that you want to generate reports for. uh, so that's what the landing page is all about. Any questions so far? Okay,
No, Shubham,
nice.
no questions.
So let's move on. Let's now look at how you activate uh, a learning activity. So here I'm going to add a learning activity for this course EXX821. So let's go to setup. So over here right now you can see for each of the learning activities it says as it's not activated. So since our focus today is evaluations and forms, let's go to the plus sign against it. Here it will show you all of the forms that our team has set up for you when you are getting onboarded, or as per your preferences, the forms that have been set up from backend, those would show up here. You can select the form that you want to activate for this course offering. Uh, Here you set up a publish date. This basically tells uh, when do students start seeing the form on their login. So if I say, for example, it needs to show up on the day of placement started, this allows me to set how faculties are going to access this form. If I want certain courses to be able to make changes to the form, change the status of the form, then I would select those roles from this drop down. If I want somebody to only look at the be able to look at the forms and not make any changes to it, I would select that role from within this second drop down. If you don't select a role from within any of the drop downs, then that role will not have any access to this form. They will not see this form in their login. So once this has been set up, you make sure the activate switch is on, and then you click on save. So once this has been done, Based on your published date, the form will start showing up for the student for the placement that has been made for them. Okay, so let's now look at a student login, how they are going to see the forms. Just give me a minute. Sorry, I got my student account got logged out, so that's why the hold up. Apologies for that.
Shubha, do you want to use another student account?
Yeah, I got one password. Okay, I'm logged in as a student now. Kanti, can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yes, we
Student.
can see your screen. Yeah, the student dashboard.
Okay, so now I'm logged in as a student. This is the student's dashboard. There are two ways for the students to access their learning activities and forms that they have to fill. They could either go and look at learning activities through this tab called learning activities. When they access it through this tab, it shows them all of the learning activities that are applicable for them, and you can see these accordions. Each of the accordion is basically a course, and you see all of the forms that they have to complete as part of that course. Uh, the other way for them to access this is through coursework. Once they go to the coursework tab, it gives them a view of all of the courses that they are currently registered into. It also shows them uh, courses where their placements have been made. It also shows what are the current placements with this current tab. They can go into enter into one of these courses, and here they can see all of the learning activities and uh, all of the forms that they have to complete as part of this course. So for us, we would go into encounter card today. So as I said, encounter card is something that you would expect students to fill out on a daily basis during their placement. So here, this student has filled in one encounter card so far. And for this card, their whole workflow has been completed. Let's add another encounter card. So let's say this is for today. They could also, if they wanted to fill it out for a past date, they could do that. Uh, so you would enter today's date here, presumably, and date of service would be the day that they were at the site. Uh, Duration, how much time was spent, where it was spent. Uh, let's say, okay. And then they get to select the preceptor that they want to send this form to. If they do not see the preceptor that they want to send it to, they can add the preceptor from here as well. Okay. So let's see. I just saved the form. As you could see, I haven't yet submitted it, so students can come back to a saved form and complete the form. I don't know what happened. Just a minute. Yeah, I forgot to refresh it properly. So anyway, so you can see I select the preceptor and I submit the form. So preceptors today do not have a formal login into Prism. So they receive an email and the email contains a link to the evaluation form that we just sent them. Let's look at that email. So this is the email that the preceptor would have received. The text is again customizable. You can set it up as per your program's preferences. But you can see there is a link embedded in here. They click on the link. And it takes them to the form that the student submitted. Okay. So you can see here what the student has submitted, the details, and this is the meat of the form. So this is the evaluation section. So in this particular form, you can see that there are certain questions and some competencies mentioned in here. So the preceptor would be evaluating the student against these competencies. So let's assume that you mark some of these things. They could add their comments and they could add a signature, draw a signature on signature pad. Once everything looks okay, they submit the form. Okay. This also shows the score that the student has received on this evaluation. So this formula you can set up as per your program's requirements. So how much credit the student should get for every response here, you could set it up as per your requirements. Once this has been done, as you can see, the status has changed here to pending school review. Okay, so now let's look at the school login again. Go to learning activities. You go to forms evaluation. So this is a view where you see summary of all the forms that have been set up for the course for every placement of the student. So this gives you a nice one look view and you get a sense of where each of the form is within the workflow, right? So our form is this one, encounter card for Kelly Rivera. So let's review this form. Okay, so they can just take a look here. Once everything looks good, they can either mark it as reviewed, or if there are certain issues, they could send it back to the students by clicking on unsubmit to student. While doing that, if you want to add certain comments for the student, you can do that as well. You can add those comments here. For now, let's just mark this as reviewed. Okay, and this ends the workflow here. So now coming back to our competency tracking, right? So in this setup, for example, you can see there are multiple forms that have been set up. For each of the forms, there would be some components where the student is getting evaluated against competencies, and we would have, in the back end, we would have mapped for each of these questions what are the competencies that these questions are evaluating. And based on that mapping, so for example, these are the numbers mentioned here of the competencies. Based on these mappings of competencies and the questions, the system generates a competency report, summative report. Okay. To access this report, you go to report section under learning activities. You could also access it from within learning activity group. Uh, this is the report, student summative assessment. So it asks you which group do you want to run this report for. Let's say for class of 2027. It lets you select the students. Student selection is multi-select. It would, if you select multiple students, it would generate a report for each of the students. So let's do that. Once you click on download report, it generates an Excel report for you. This is what the report looks like. So each of the columns in the report is a combination of your course and form. So this will, for example, generate report for all of the forms that you have set for a given, given set of courses in the course group. Uh, the columns are courses and forms combination, and each of the row represents every competency that has been set up in the system. Okay, so these texts of competencies, again, you can set up as per your program's requirements. Then what the report does is, based on the evaluations that have been filled for the students, it will show you the average rating that the student has received for each of the competencies that has been evaluated across all of these different forms. Okay. At the end, you also see the mean score that the student has received for that competency, and also see how many times the student was evaluated against that competency. Okay. So this gives you a very good view of where the student is. Like I said, this report can be generated for multiple students. Each tab of the Excel sheet uh, is a report for one student. So you could traverse through your students. You could generate this report for your whole class, and you would have a one consolidated view of uh, how every student has fared against every competency. So this is one report that we have today, and this can be customized as per your program's requirements. So again, you can get in touch with your account manager, and if you need some variations of this report, we could, make it possible for your program. But as I was saying earlier, we are also working on a major feature release for competency management, which would be released in first 2 quarters of 2024. Uh, Within that period, we will be releasing even more reports to help you track competencies. Right now, although this report gives you a very good information and very good insights about students progress against competencies, we would have even more detailed reports, easier reports to run even from front end, some graphical reports as well. So we are excited, and hope that would help you all to track competencies even better. But this is the offering today. If you need any changes to the reports, you can get in touch with your account managers. Any questions so far? Okay,
Please
so
use. Okay.
yes.
I'm just asking to see if there are any questions. They can always use the question section to put in their questions, or please raise your hand. Use the raise hand option so I can unmute you and you can ask your question.
Okay, in the meantime, we can also get another report that we have in the system, which is not related to competency uh, tracking, but it just gives you a view of, if you just wanted to look at how uh, people have responded to different uh, questions in a form. You could use this raw data report. It generates, it basically gives you an overall, okay, sadly it's not available right now, but this would give you a view of how students have responded to every question in a selected form. So you can select your form from here, select rotations, which status you want to generate reports for, and this would also generate a front end as well as a Excel report for you, which would show you the, in the columns it would show you all the questions and the responses every student has provided for every question. Beyond this, again, as per your requirements, you can communicate those with your account manager and we can help make that possible in the system. Any questions so far, Kanti?
No, Shubda, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay.
Okay, then this is all that I wanted to cover today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shubda. And that brings us to the end of this webinar. If you have a few questions, we would love to hear from you. So please stick around once the webinar ends for a short survey to let us know how we are doing, what can be improved, and any additional topics you would like to see in the future. Have a great day, have a great day, everyone, and thank you once again for joining us on this webinar. Thank you.